Well, welcome everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of our friends in the press and to the community this morning. I certainly want to introduce all the people that are going to be speaking that are in the room. Mayor Ginther, Council President Hardin, Chief Quinlan, former United States Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, Carter Stewart, and Dr. Trevor Brown, the Dean of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at The Ohio State University. Also recognize Director Ned Pettis, the Director of Public Safety. Thanks for being here. So back in June, as the Chief Legal Officer in the City of Columbus, I announced that as part of my own 8 reforms, that the City of Columbus should really take a deep dive into how the city, generally speaking, handled the protests from May 28th, really until most recently, I think, July 18th. This is an independent, outside review of Columbus's response to the recent protests for the purpose of recommending any potential policy changes to law enforcement and to the city leadership to improve future responses to similar events. Because the reality is these protests aren't going anywhere. We are the 14th largest city in the United States, and while the underlying issues and the reasons why people protest may change, we are still going to have protests. And I think that through an independent, objective review of the way the city of Columbus handled it, celebrating the things that police in the city got right so that we can continue to do those things, but also identify things that we got wrong and how we can not only identify them, but fix them moving forward so that the city of Columbus can be a national leader in how we balance First Amendment, but still allow protesting in a safe manner, not only from a safety of police, but safety of protesters and for businesses in our community. So I want to thank all the leaders here today that agree with this vision and share the belief that this policy research that will be done in conjunction with the John Glenn School and Dr. Trevor Brown, as well as Carter Stewart, will review and improve the way our city leads in the future. This was born out of an idea that was actually done in the city of Charlottesville. So Charlottesville had their event and incident where white supremacists and protesters came together about the removal of a statue. Many will recall there was actually a death that happened in Charlottesville. The city was outraged about what happened. So city leadership got together and they brought together a former U.S. attorney from Charlottesville. His name's Tim Hafey. He's now the general counsel at the University of Virginia. Tim at the time was at a law firm. And so the city engaged Tim as an expert in the field, as well as someone who was trusted in the community, who had experience in the community, to do a very similar review for Charlottesville. He interviewed law enforcement, he interviewed white supremacist protesters, he interviewed Black Lives Matter protesters, he interviewed city leadership, and then came together with a very comprehensive report of what Charlottesville got right and what Charlottesville got wrong. I spent some time talking with Tim in preparation of figuring out how can the city of Columbus do something similar so that we can learn from our mistakes, but also continue the things that we got right. Because we got several things right, and we need to continue to do those things, but figure out how we identify and fix the things we got wrong. Additionally to this, in talking with Tim, one of the most important aspects of having a comprehensive, objective, independent report was simply just part of the community healing process. A process where businesses, protesters, police, we're all able to look at this independent, objective report and come together with a final analysis that it was done truly independently and objectively so that the city then could move forward post-protests. So today, announcing that Carter Stewart and the John Glenn College will be involved, I thought, who is the Tim Hafey of the city of Columbus? Who is the person that has the leadership and expertise with law enforcement, who has a background and is uniquely qualified, but my friend Carter Stewart. Carter is the former United States Attorney to the Southern District, or for the Southern District of Ohio. He was nominated by President Barack Obama, was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. That means that's something that doesn't quite happen today in Washington, but supported by Republicans and Democrats. He's someone who has a local connection, but is not immersed in local politics. Carter has deep roots in Columbus, and it has a background in law enforcement and investigation, and also spends time working on social justice reform and racial equity issues, and is a professor, in addition to a job that he's going to be taking a break from to do this review, is also a professor at the Moritz College of Law. His qualifications, in my opinion, make him the right person at the right time to bring that independent credibility and voice to this situation. In partnering with the John Glenn College under the leadership of Dr. Trevor Brown, the dean, I think will allow us to help bolster the independence and credibility of this by bringing the significant research component that will bolster the results and provide the objectivity of this sponsored research project. This will allow not only the resources of the Glenn School and its staff and academics to really dive in on best practices and how we can move forward. I want to just clear up, I think, some confusion in the community before I turn it over to the mayor. If you would look at this from a macro and micro level, the micro investigations are the ones that are being done by Rick Wozniak and by Baker and Hosteller. They are individual uses of force that have been alleged, that have been submitted to the mayor's hotline and are now being investigated, each specific individual use of force on a micro level. That is different than what we're talking about today, which is a macro policy after action review. This is a holistic look at the way the city of Columbus handled the protests. It is not a look at each individual incident. It is a look at policies and procedures, about communications, about planning. It's asking those global holistic questions about how the city of Columbus planned, prepared, executed its response to protest, again, on the time frame of May 28 to July 18. So I wanted to clear and clarify any confusion that may think, like, what is this particular purpose of review different from what Baker and Hosteller is doing for the IAB investigation or what Rick Wozniak is doing for a criminal investigation. They are completely different. In our conversations with Carter and the Glenn School, we've talked to them. They are not doing a deep dive on individual uses of force. They are doing a holistic macro review of the police response and the city's response. So at this time, I want to bring up Mayor Ginther, but before I do that, I do want to give a special recognition to Chief Quinlan because this will cost the city in a contract that will be on for council to vote on Monday, $250,000. And a large chunk of that $250,000 is coming from Chief Quinlan's police seizure fund. And I think it's a testament to the chief's leadership that he recognizes the need to figure out what happened, to celebrate the things we got right. And I know in the chief's opinion, he thinks we got a lot of things right. But also to recognize with open eyes and objectivity the things that we got wrong so that we can fix them. So Chief Quinlan, thank you for your leadership in expending these funds that are within your discretion to make the Columbus Division of Police the best division in the United States. So at this time, I want to bring up my friend, Mayor Andrew Ginther.
Good morning, and thank you, City Attorney Klein, and to Council President Hardin, Chief Quinlan, former U.S. Attorney Carter Stewart, Dr. Trevor Brown, Dean of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at The Ohio State University. Our community has been through a great deal in the last few weeks, months, the outpouring of grief and anger, the death of George Floyd. We watched that emotion, loss, frustration, anger spill into our streets. Activists marched, shouted their rage, protested the unfair and unjust acts at the hands of law enforcement around the country. As city leaders, we have stood and marched with protesters. We've listened to what they want, their stories, injustices. fears, concerns for themselves and their families. We made solid progress in police reform during these trying few weeks. The seating of the Chiefs Advisory Panel, limitations on use of force. Just this week, our intention for a charter amendment to make a civilian review board part of the city's constitution. But now is the time to look back at how we handled those protests. Some people will use terms like after-action reports, but I think perhaps we could better describe it as lessons learned. And as the chief, the director, and I talk all the time, my administration and municipal government has to be solely focused on continuous improvement, regardless of the department, the division, and the work. Continuous improvement. Acknowledging the things that we have done well, but also owning when we miss the mark. As I've said to you before, I've made mistakes. I've accepted responsibility and ownership of those mistakes. Others in the community have as well. And although this report and review won't look at any individual's actions, it will look at our policies, our procedures, our approach, and how we handled the protests of the last several weeks. Again, continuous improvement, the commitment, and the value and the priority we make to the people of Columbus. To have clarity on our actions over the last few weeks, we need a set or two of fresh eyes, people who were not directly involved in the conflicts and protests. And what City Attorney Klein is giving us today, holistic research into how we handled the protests, from our preparedness to our communications. I fully support the work to be done by former U.S. Attorney Carter Stewart and the Glenn School at the Ohio State University. And I look forward to the recommendations in continuing to improve and serve all of the people of Columbus to make sure that our city can be the very best it can be. It's now my honor to introduce our legislative leader, Council President Shannon Hardin.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly thank you to City Attorney Klein for the work and his leadership in this critical space, to Mr. Carter Stewart, to the Dean, to our Chief. It's an honor to be here. So the process that City Attorney Klein outlined is critical to how our city learns and how we evolve. We can't lose sight of the moment that we are in. Some estimate that this may be the largest social movement in our nation's history. And at a moment's notice, our streets could fill again with folks who want to see change and not see it tomorrow, but see it yesterday. While this review will focus on the past, it will help guide our city's work in the future. I don't think I or anyone up here thinks this review replaces the substantive legislative, budgetary, and policy changes ahead of us. Obviously, this review doesn't replace the work of reforming our division of police. This doesn't replace a community engagement process to reimagine safety leading into the 2021 operating budget, or creating a new structures for accountability like Civilian Police Review Board. But if we don't learn from our history, then we are doomed to repeat it. As leaders, we must reflect on how we handled this major moment in our city's history. And what I can attest to is what I saw and heard and felt firsthand made clear to me that we could do better, a lot better. And the best way that we can learn is by empowering objective experts to review and analyze our city's response. So on behalf of my colleagues on council, I'm happy to support the independent endeavor. We have to be dedicated to learning from our past in order to improve our policies, our procedures, and our communications to do better for our residents in the future. In addition to council's 4-part legislative package, we will be advancing funding for this effort this coming Monday, July 27th at council. With that, I'd like to introduce our police chief, Chief Quinlan.
Thank you, Council President Hardin. Good morning. As the Chief of Police, there's nothing more important to me than the safety of our community and my duty to provide my officers with the resources they need to professionally provide services our community expects. So I am always looking forward to acquiring resources and creating meaningful reforms that will help us deliver on our promise to be here for every person in our community. But sometimes, to look forward, we must pause and look backwards and critically assess the methods used to achieve our mission. We will acquire an accurate picture of all the great work officers performed under some of the most challenging circumstances most officers have ever experienced in their time with the Division of Police. We will also evaluate where we fell short of expectations and what we can learn and improve on from those lessons. I am very proud of the officers who serve our community and carried out their duties under some of the most complex and tenuous circumstances and encounters one might imagine. Ultimately, any failures on our part rest on my shoulders, and as the head of the agency, I believe it is more informative to gain an outside examination of our strategies and tactics used during the recent protests here in our city. I am supporting City Attorney Klein's request that I allocate non-taxpayer dollars to accomplish this examination. I am approving $250,000 of our drug seizure funds to invite an external audit of our division so we can once again look forward to the work still to be done for the people of Columbus. Thank you, and I'd like to now turn the microphone back over to City Attorney Klein.
Thank you, Chief, again for your leadership. And I, at this time, want to bring up Carter Stewart and Dr. Trevor Brown.
Thank you, City Attorney Klein. It is an honor to be asked to lead this research effort. But of course, it's also a great responsibility. As the mayor said, this is a moment of pain for Columbus and for so many cities across the country. But it's also an opportunity for self-reflection and for us to grow as a community. And that's essentially what this research project is intended to do. We're going to look at the facts of what happened, how we got to this moment, what went right, what went wrong, and figure out how we as a community can do better. To do that, we're going to recruit a team of researchers, lawyers, academics, students, and community volunteers to engage in a three-part process. First, we're going to gather all the relevant information we can. That means interviewing witnesses, both law enforcement and members of the public. It means looking at video evidence. It means looking at incident reports, communications among law enforcement, and the like. Second, we will work with a team of independent experts in policing, community engagement, civil rights, organizational behavior to analyze that information and evaluate the gaps between what the expected outcomes were and what actually happened. Lastly, we will make research-informed recommendations for how the city can respond better to future such incidents. The end result will be a written report, which will be given to the City Council. I want to commend the Mayor, City Council, City Attorney Klein, and City President Hardin and Chief Quinlan for engaging in this review in the first place. It takes political courage to hold up the city to this type of review. But I think they recognize that sometimes doing the right thing means doing the tough thing, and we're all going to be better for it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Trevor Brown. I'm Dean of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at Ohio State University. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to all the city's leaders who've made this effort possible. The Glenn College's involvement is to lead this research endeavor. We are a research enterprise, and our job is to generate fair, balanced and objective research analysis to improve public performance. So Carter's just laid out the process that we intend to engage in to drive this research forward. But I just want to assure you that from a research standpoint, our job is to make sure that this is fair, balanced, and objective. The Glenn College is an interdisciplinary unit in a very large comprehensive university, part of a wide network of scholars from different disciplines and different backgrounds. And we are going to draw upon that expertise to get that holistic picture of how the city performed and how it could perform better. There are lots of cities around the country engaged in this kind of activity now, so we will also get the benefit of learning from other cities and their reviews as well. So again, our perspective is one of scholarship. How do we understand the phenomenon and how do we make it better? And we're looking forward to ensuring that this meets the standards of all the research that we do at Ohio State University and in the broader scholarly community, particularly because there will be human subjects involved in this research. We will be involved in interviews, in engaging with participants, whether they be protesters, observers, law enforcement, and our job is to ensure that they are treated in a confidential manner and that they're able to come forward and bring whatever information they seek to in a way that will be treated appropriately in a research process. So we're proud and privileged to be taking on this role and look forward to the process. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Attorney Klein.
Thank you, Dean. So at this point, I think we'll do something similar since all y'all were here the other day. We'll just take questions from the podium and then we'll do one-on-ones. And for anyone that's standing here, so go ahead, Lacey.
How long do you expect this process to last, and how will you select those who you'll interview from the protesters to the law enforcement side?
Sure. I'll let the second question be answered by Trevor and Carter. But the first question, I have asked Trevor and Carter to have this done by the end of the year. To put things in perspective, Charlottesville took 90 days. And because there is a research component to this, and because this is a research-driven project, there are institutional hurdles that Trevor can talk to at the university about independent peer review, et cetera, that needs to be set up. So as they set those things up, that clock will then start running so that Carter and Trevor can get to work. So I don't know, Carter, you want to go into further depth with that?
We will work with city leaders and law enforcement leaders to figure out who the key folks are to interview in the beginning related to key incidents, but we're going to work backwards from there and make this as inclusive as possible. So we don't want to limit ourselves in terms of who we're going to interview.
Are you asking for people to step forward, or are you going to be reaching out to people?
Both.
What kinds of things are you going to do to make sure protesters trust you? Trust the investigation?
Yeah, that is going to be a work in progress. It's going to, in part, relate to who we invite to be on our team to reach out, but this is going to be a process where we want to be as transparent as possible and build that trust. We recognize that it's difficult to do, and in fact, Tim Hafey, whom the city attorney mentioned, had trouble getting protesters, at least some protester leaders, to come forward, but he was still able to put together a comprehensive report. So we're going to do the best we can in terms of building trust in that regard.
I've been clear from the beginning that I am never shy about having an outside entity look at our performance because I believe in our officers and how they perform their job. Again, it's a crazy situation out there sometimes, and they're making instantaneous decisions. We can always look back and say, should have done it this way. So I think that's a situation where an outside independent review can look at and confirm what was done right, what was done wrong. I welcome that, and I am going to direct our personnel that if they're called upon to give their insight into what occurred or what their experience was, or maybe what they even felt were shortcomings on my part or others, to speak freely.
Just to clarify, the entire $250,000 is coming from the police drug seizure fund?
No, the legislation, which will be submitted to council, roughly just over $200,000 will come from the police seizure fund, and then the remaining $49,000-ish will come from another sub-fund within the general fund budget. you say unrelated or related?
Well, it's related.
Okay.
So, obviously Project Falling was going on in Portland and with federal, enforcement efforts there. How would Columbus respond if the Trump administration tried to send federal law enforcement into our city?
Well, I'll certainly let the mayor respond. I would have significant problems as the city attorney and chief law enforcement officer or chief legal officer for the city of Columbus. Some of the videos that I've seen are so disturbing that there are unidentified individuals that are essentially capturing people and throwing them in unmarked cars. Like, how do you differentiate between folks who are law enforcement and folks who are kidnappers or human traffickers? That gives me significant pause, and I think is one of the biggest shortcomings and failures of the Trump administration's approach of parachuting military personnel into a community, causing chaos and uncertainty. And that certainly puts our own law enforcement on edge of how do you differentiate between bad actors and those who may be, having a badge, or even the authority, because they are federal officials, authority to effectuate arrests for local crimes or for state crimes. I think there's a whole host of jurisdictional and constitutional problems that the federal government is going to have to face. They're currently facing them in court in Portland. It's probably soon to be facing it in Chicago. But I would certainly want the Division of Police to be able to effectuate the promotion of safety within our community, and that I think would mean questioning the individuals who are trying to make those arrests when they can't even be identified, and they're essentially kidnapping individuals and throwing them into unmarked cars. How do you differentiate friend from foe? And I think that is a major problem, and I certainly, if the mayor or the chief wants to talk.
Well, I think the city attorney spoke very clearly about this. And I'll let the chief say a word. The governor and I speak almost daily and have worked very closely together over the last several weeks and months. And I have told the governor that if he speaks to the president, I don't regularly speak to the president, that we were good. That the governor and the city of Columbus, the Division of Police, the Highway Patrol, that we were confident in our ability to serve and protect the community during this time. And we would not welcome nor need or accept federal law enforcement coming into our community at this time. Chief?
I realize I've been chief for a fairly short time and still learning, things I need to understand for the job. One thing I do realize that this is uniquely more of a political decision, so I'm not going to weigh in on the actual idea of federal law enforcement or peacekeepers or whatever you want to call them. What I will say is I have full faith and confidence in our officers to provide safety for this community. Thank you.
Chief, what would that money normally go towards, the $200,000?
So we have a lot of resources that we can provide through drug seizures that are not typically part of the general fund or capital budgets, that we can provide our officers with specialized vehicles. Like yesterday, you saw armored vehicles out in front of a house where 2 officers were shot. And we're able to successfully resolve that through the use of gas into the house and not cause any harm to the lady that was involved in that, other than the initial exchange of gunfire. So those are the type of piece of equipment. They're mostly personal protective equipment and other resources that we need to run the Division of Police without further taxing the general fund budget. And we use it very wisely and expeditiously for that reason. And I count on City Council to take a look at the fund that I put forward and to approve the items that, in my professional opinion, the Division of Police needs to provide safe and fluid operations in the Division of Police.
Chief, could you talk about, I don't know if you can share the details, but how much money is actually in that fund that would remain after the $200,000 is found?
Is that okay to talk about? Yes, we had typically the fund runs approximately $1.8 to $2.4 million on any given year. We recently had a large drug pill case with a doctor, and because of that, our fund this year is just over $10 million. We seized a very large amount of money we shared with the federal government. So we have a lot of available revenue to spend there. I've identified about $9 million that I want to spend, so I have something in reserve. However, I've identified where we need to spend that money, for instance, like a real-time crime center, equipment for our officers to be safe and provide the ability to de-escalate and do the things that are needed to resolve things peacefully with less use of force. So everything in there is earmarked and approved by me personally as an item that needs to be acquired by the Division of Police, and we can do that without burdening the good people of Columbus through tax dollars. Anything else before we do one-on-ones?